Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good day. Welcome to another Chapters International webinar. And thank you all for being here. Again, I say this for every webinar and every workshop. Thank you all for giving up, spending another hour in front of the screen. So I know how difficult that is, but thank you. I won't say much, but I just want to introduce the Inspire Citizens team. Steve, Aaron, and Kavita. We've been kind of working back and forth for a couple of years, and it just feels good to finally have and host something with them. One thing which really came across to me with all their talk, and there's a lot they talk about, is what Steve quoted from James Baldwin, and is very pertaining to today's time, really, is not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. And I think this whole thing is all about what's going to happen and what they're going to say about in this workshop. So thank you all. And I'm going to just hang this out to Steve, Aaron, and Kavita. Thank you.
Awesome. Guys, again, just to echo Shonal, thank you so much for being here today. And we're gonna throw a lot of, I think, interesting things your direction, but we do want to really come back to that idea of what James Baldwin really was saying. He's a very inspirational person to the work that we do. And that idea of I think in 2020, we all know now it's time, right? And I think a lot of our schools, we do have missions and visions that we are sort of facing some of the things you see on this title slide here, where we talk about sustainable development, we talk about social justice, we talk about collective well-being and SEL and ethics, and we embed some of that into some of the classrooms and some of the work that we do. We know that a lot of us are working towards that direction. But I think what we're going to get out of today with Empathy to Impact and the work that Inspire Citizens does is to really give you the blueprint to make it happen, to walk the walk, and to take it to that next level together. We can do this. We can transform schools to really hit those 4 bullets that you see at the bottom on this slide and really work towards that idea of our schools and our education systems can be, the driver to, sustainable change in the future. And I hope you walk away today with that. Aaron, did you want to add anything as I pass it over really quickly? Talk a little bit about what you see here. That would be fantastic.
Well, again, I will just say, thank you to everybody for being here. And, Inspire Citizens, has been a dream for Steve, Kavita, and myself, because these are all things that we were doing in our classroom. And we realized that it wasn't just, us that wanted this. It was the teachers across the hallway that were saying, well, how did you do that? And then eventually all these other teachers out at different conferences saying, well, can you show us how to do that? Because this is the most pertinent thing in our world right now. If we can use schools as a driver or schools as a place for community impact, between the thousands of schools that we have internationally and all the brilliant minds and brilliant potential that we have, and we can find simple tweaks and that to be able to make that a reality, then I really think that we should do it. And I really do think that the time is now. And exactly what you're going to hear today is a little bit of an example of ways that it's being done. And then also we're going to give you a quick introduction to some really powerful tools that you can sort of walk away with as well.
And before I introduce Kavita, I just wanted to give you a little layout of what we're going to be doing today. You can see that Empathy to Impact, the bolded words at the bottom here, that's going to be 90% of what we talk about and share with you today. But we do want to mention that, we do a lot of things with schools, and Aaron and I, we met as co-teachers, like Aaron said. We just left the classroom about 2.5 years ago. As Kavita just left the classroom, we're very much teacher first. We're very much against things like, initiative overload, and we're very pro teacher well-being and student empowerment. So part of our goal is, with all of the things you see on this slide, are various ways that we've been working towards really making it make sense for teachers so that there's synergy, right? There's that idea of you're already doing really great things. And if we, like Aaron said, if we can just tweak a few things to add that greater purpose, to add that informed action and that civic literacy component to the great stuff that we're already doing, now we have, in some ways I feel like we have the answers, right? We can really go forward together to make a really big difference in the world. So the Global Impact School thing, all the way down. We're going to walk through briefly, and then we'll dive into empathy to impact. Aaron and I have already talked a lot about ourselves. This is just a little bit about me. I'm a saxophone player. I love street photography. That's one of my big things right now. I like to do street photography of street art. That's kind of something that really is a passion of mine. And Aaron and I founded Inspire Citizens. He was my co-teacher. He was learning support co-teacher in my grade 6 humanities class back at the International School of Beijing, where we met. And we were both punk rockers at the time, or he was. I was an old punk rocker at the time. And we connected on what Aaron was talking about, this idea that schools and classrooms can implement the Sustainable Development Goals. We can work towards social justice. We can work towards wellness, and that can be the why of what we do. Aaron, anything you want to talk about really quickly about your classroom stuff?
Yeah, well, and again, we did meet as co-teachers. Been a special ed teacher for the last 10 years, and that was my sort of advocacy lens to education at first. And then we realized that there are just so many other things that we could work towards doing with our students, especially when you leverage student passion and what students care about. And so now I'm just really happy that I get to spend every day working with inspiring educators around the world to think about their teaching, their context, their children, and how it is that we can use that to do something positive. So hello and welcome. Kavita.
Yes, and Kavita, not to forget one of our most important people on the team.
Thank you so much, guys. So yes, I've had the privilege of working with these guys for a while now, and the change word is the really sort of important word, I think, for what we're talking about, because I'm known to quote the the words of Mahatma Gandhi of "Be the change you wish to see in the world." And I feel that really complements the approach that we take in Inspire Citizens of really empowering you as educators, as the masters of your classroom and the artists that can create what it is that you really want to see happen in the world. And so, that's really what we're going to be focusing on today, that how can we empower you and really sort of enhance what you're already doing such a great job with already, of inspiring your students, making a difference in the world with everything that you do. So, we're going to really sort of talk about how we ground that in that holistic sense of well-being, which is where I sort of have my passion. So you can see that over my shoulder. And then the ripple effect of that in really sort of impacting the wider world as we continue through the journey of, okay, I'm well now. So what? Well, now I have all this energy to give to others. So what am I going to do? What am I going to do about it? And so that's really what we're going to be talking you through today.
Awesome. And guys, we're going to do a little zooming out to zoom in. So if you look here, we're going to start with what's called our Global Impact School self-study, which is it can be used as an auditing tool, which Aaron's going to talk about, but really it's just a self-reflection tool. So Aaron, do you want to give us a little bit of the big picture so then we can eventually zoom into empathy to impact?
Absolutely. So over years of working on specifically empathy to impact, curriculum design and support work with teachers, we realized that actually what a lot of schools want and what a lot of schools need help with is actually a whole school implementation model. Right. And instead of they could do it in a way that it's just based off of the Inspire Citizens team coming in to work on it. But we also created a self-study tool that helps people with criterion and pathways so that they can make sure that their mission and vision is contextually and geographically and culturally appropriate. And it's based around action and global competence. And then there's some help on how to work on professional learning systems and implementation approaches. There's a whole bunch of information on how it is that you can work on curriculum design, and then having that same mission and vision in your whole school filter through into leadership programs, your student competency, your student learner outcomes programs, and have that still filter into your local and global partnerships, and also how you're using your school to make sure that you approach personal and collective well-being. And so when you have all of that aligned, right, and you can have a whole system a whole school implementation system to support that, then it takes what we're talking about for empathy to impact, and it involves hundreds, if not thousands of people. So if you're interested in that, please have a look online at the Global Impact School self-study.
And it is, guys, it's about 150 pages, but a lot of pictures to direct that work that Aaron talked about, and it's free if you just reach out through our website. So I know a lot of you already have it, but please feel free to send us an email for that. Kavita, would you like to talk a little bit about our leadership work?
Definitely. So, we've sort of alluded to our empathy to impact, project design cycle. And what we realized was that we could sort of complement that work directly with our students, not just through the implementation of curriculum design. And so we created the Student Civic Leadership Toolkit that originally started under the, very catchy name of 17 Skills for 17 Goals, but quickly expanded because we put it out to the students. We gave the students at one of our main partnership schools the voice, the agency, and we said to them that, okay, you want to be the next leaders? Tell us what you think you need. What skills do you need to become the next leaders of your world? And we ended up with about 50 different skills that they said, well, we want to know how to do this. We want to know how to express ourselves. We want to make sure that we're really, really clear on our why, what's our driving force. We really want to know how to do meaningful research. We want to know how to link it with the learning that's happening in our classrooms. And most of all, they wanted to know, how do we actually take meaningful action for the people that matter to us? So whether that's, doing it for self, whether that's extending out to the school community, the local community, or even further out into the world, because a lot of these students are third culture kids. And so their identity is all over the place, all over the world. It really was a powerful exercise to discover that, wow, okay, you really have a good idea of how you want to become a leader and what kind of leader you want to be. So that's how we created the Student Civic Leadership Toolkit. And 2 of our schools are actually going to be implementing that as part of their programs. So we're pretty excited about it.
Awesome. And this is kind of one of my big passions. We also do what's called global youth media. And, we looked, I'm a huge National Public Radio and podcast fan, and we looked just like a Readers and Writers Workshop. We were thinking about, the fact that our kids do live in such a challenging and complex social media and media environment. And are we really, honoring their needs in terms of being able to help them be critical thinkers when it comes to media literacy? So we have designed a media literacy program that looks not only at the consumption of media and the critical thinking involved in that particular aspect, but then just like you would read like a writer or write like a reader, we're taking these podcasts and these documentaries, et cetera, and unpacking them in ways that kids can then produce ethical media, ethical journalism for, a challenging global society. So these are actually, again, back to the 17, we have 17 podcasts that range from science podcasts to debate for impact. We look at music, we look at sports, we look at food for culture, et cetera. And this is actually something that we're going to be launching officially globally next month with about 12 schools. And we're looking for partner schools and member stations to engage with us in this endeavor. And again, you can see some of our inspirations here are everything from Code Switch to the Tiny Desk concerts. Here's some of our kids in Seoul that actually have started a group called Voice Lab at Seoul Foreign School. So again, please reach out if you're interested in working with us in global youth media. And last but not least, Mr. Moniz, you want to talk briefly about, or Kavita, I think you were going to talk about this, or was this Mr. Moniz?
Kavita, go for it, Mr. Moniz. Okay, I'll do it. So this is something that will be very familiar to a few of you in the room. So, we're excited to have some of the teachers around the world with us today because we have introduced and launched maybe 4 weeks ago now, our Master Teacher Endorsement. And what we're hoping to do in this course is to really, again, it's that empowerment piece of educators, build capacity in schools around the world around this visual, which we call our student impact profile. So what we're really looking to do is to work through the different elements of the student impact profile with the educators to really help us to ground ourselves in that big why of, okay, schooling, has been designed as a process that for the young students. So what do we want them to be? what do we want them to be able to do once they leave school? So this visual talks us through, okay, you know, what are the behaviors that we might see, the attitudes? What are the connections that are going to be being made to the curriculum? But fundamentally, how are they going to impact change? What for and how? So we've got the whole why, the how, the what. If you all are familiar with the Simon Sinek Golden Circles, we're pretty much covering that in the Master Teacher Endorsement over this year. So again, although we've launched Institute 1 with the Chapters International, you know, you are free to sign up for the others, and hopefully we'll be doing this again and again and again, because I'm loving the process. So yeah, so I hope that, you know, we'll see a few of you in that.
Yeah, it's going really well, guys. And one of the things that's exciting about it is it's both synchronous and asynchronous. So during the week, we have some asynchronous work that people can work through for about 3 to 5 hours. And then we end every week with a Socratic seminar live. And some of those seminars have been just the rich discussion that comes out of that is amazing. And one last side note, I promise it's not 97 weeks down here. I just noticed that. It's actually 7 weeks. So anyway, we won't make you study for 97 weeks, we promise. It's just 7. All right, let's go. Empathy to impact. Mr. Mona, get us started.
Absolutely. So we have coined the phrase empathy to impact, right? And really what it means is whenever we have the stuff that we need to teach, can we make sure that we're intentionally attaching a why this matters, and a what now? If we can get students to care about something deeply, then we launch inquiry, then we get them into the project-based learning cycle, then we get into that design cycle, and we get them motivated and engaged enough to learn the stuff that we have to teach within our scope and sequence and within our curriculum. And then if you can add some kind of a what now to the end, so that this beautiful potential, all of these skills that we're helping to, you know, develop in these students don't just end at the assessments, so the teacher gets to receive them and then it goes away. If we can actually turn that into some kind of an impact project, some kind of a what now, then we actually get deeper engagement in the standards that we have to teach. And it's just a slight tweak and a little bit more intentionality by adding something we care about to allow them to become more aware, so that they're able to reach their standards, and then it's used to create impact in their community.
And guys, it's going to be really exciting, I think, today, because what you'll see is, you know, we know that the ABLE section, that applied learning, that interdisciplinary learning, the wonderful things that you're already doing in your classrooms is where, in a lot of ways, you guys are the masters, right? And as teachers first, we always like to come in and work with schools and teachers saying, like, you guys are rocking here. You are the artists. And a lot of teachers are doing all elements of this. But when we can really amplify this section, care, we can really dive into the different literacies, you know, what we would call modern literacies or civic literacies, utilizing your you know, applied learning standards or your language or your technology. And then Aaron talked about making an impact that's very, you know, it can be local, it can be personal, it can be internal in the school, it can be in the global community, etc. You're giving the kids that sense of relevance, that transfer, that conceptual piece that we're always looking for. And I think you're going to see some images and some things that we talk about today that are really going to bring that to life. So we're going to start with care. Kavita?
So as I mentioned earlier, you know, we really want to help you and your students to ground yourself in that sense of well-being. So we really want to support that sense of personal well-being and filling our own cup that extends out into that sense of collective well-being. So when we're looking at that, we're really looking to understand that well-being is more than just eating right and exercising and, you know, the physical elements. So we really sort of want to extend that out to the collective and then move on to thinking about, okay, well, now that I feel good and now that my community feels good, how are we going to reach out to our community in a way that's meaningful? So how are we going to extend that out into social justice? And as we do that, it's really going to be having an impact on the world. And we can use the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals to see how we're having that effect on the world, because those 17 goals really speak to all of those things. It speaks to elements of well-being. It speaks to how do we form relationships with one another, particularly number 17, the partnership for the goals. And so, you know, and then it extends out further to other areas that we're going to get into in this presentation today. So let's have a look. Sorry, I was just going to say, let's have a look first of all at the dimensions of well-being. So what we do is that we use different visuals as provocation, and you can see here an example of some student work. And these are grade 5. So the grade 5s, you know, are able to access this and all the way through to grade 12. And in fact, I've just set it up to be able to do it with even younger grades. So this work is really accessible across the entire school when we're thinking about how do we determine and define our personal and collective well-being. And so what we've done is that to help you sort of see what it is that we're doing, we've shown you some examples of what our students have actually done to demonstrate their learning. Because as we're talking through the Empathy to Impact project design cycle, we've been saying, well, why? Why do we need to be well? Well, so that we can feel good in ourselves, and then we're better placed to benefit others. But the what now is, okay, so what am I actually going to do? You know, am I going to run classes? So that's my physical well-being. Am I going to, you know, spend some time thinking about how I'm extending my intellectual awareness with what's happening in the world with the Sustainable Development Goals? Am I going to build cross-cultural relationships? Am I going to reach out to students in different grades in order to build that emotional element, that empathy between one another of what it's like to go through the schooling system? Am I going to engage with nature, the environmental piece? Am I going to encourage others to take a moment, that spiritual well-being, you know, just have some quiet time, some downtime? How am I going to take care of my mental health? Am I going to adopt a dog as my colleague Steve did during the lockdown, you know, and take care of an animal, you know, to create that sense of mental well-being? And occupational well-being, you know, for young students, that can be, how do I contribute to the house? What chores am I going to do? Or it could be trying to find out about different careers that exist in the world. So it's really sort of thinking about, okay, what is well-being? What is that collective sense of well-being, and how can I influence others to act that out?
And, you know, we do talk a lot about the why in this care section in terms of how, you know, social justice, sustainable development, and well-being are interdependent and interconnected. And social justice, obviously today, you know, I'm in Chicago right now, and I've been here for 8 months. And, you know, going through some of the, you know, unmasking of systemic racism for a lot of people in the United States, and also thinking a lot about being an international educator and the way that we look at the curriculum itself, and the opportunities for us to provide students with different perspectives, and to look at not only their own identities in terms of the different, you know, cultural identities and worldviews that they have and how they've developed their own views of the world, but then also to push outwards and to really look at what we call immersive learning experiences, where they can start to move from a cognitive sense of empathy into a more compassionate sense of empathy, connecting with people on a deeper level so that they can truly start to understand diversity. And I think a lot of times, you know, with all due respect to our curriculum, and, you know, that we do a lot of work in the cognitive realm. We do read a lot of books, especially in our schools. We do have a lot of field trips and opportunities to go to communities to provide services. But do we get to a point where we can build immersive relationships that are reciprocal, so that we can truly, you know, find an appreciation for what diversity is? And then once you can get to that, you can really start to act for what we would then consider to call justice. And, you know, that comes down to simple things such as equity. And you'll notice here, we rely on teaching tolerance meta-language very often when we work with schools. Those of you that, if you know teachingtolerance.org, they've got fantastic resources. And this is the kind of meta-language they have running all the way from kindergarten through grade 12 to get students into being able to articulate more of a sense of purpose towards identity, towards diversity, and towards a more just and equitable society. And then, Mr. Monis, let's talk a little bit on that bigger scale, that glocalizing.
And also, I want to just reiterate, when we're talking about all these things that we can care about, right? These are all ways that we can start to either run simulations, we can pose questions, we can do experiential learning opportunities, we can do something so that students are experiencing these questions. They're analyzing their own well-being and saying, oh, wait a second, maybe that is something I need to learn more about. Maybe that is something that's going to drive my inquiry forward. Maybe I realize that somebody else is unwell or there is an injustice happening here. These are the questions that start that provocation of inquiry, and then you'll see where we go with the next aware, able, and impact, that these are sort of the anchor points, starting with that heart to move forward, right? And the Sustainable Development Goals are a fantastic opportunity for that as well, because the United Nations, right? When students hear about the United Nations and the importance of the United Nations, right, they say, wow, like this great world body needs my help to do these things to make the world a better place. And so the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals are a great place to just have students say, yeah, I do care about the environment. I do care about reducing inequalities. I do care about gender equality. Like how could I help to contribute to that? And what's great about the UN resources, right, is that if you then go to globalgoals.org, they have their SDGs, right? And then so they give you basically, or the Sustainable Development Goals, and then students can say, oh yeah, how do I contribute to quality education? But then they also give you a little bit of information on context and how, like what it is, what the issue is, and why it's important in our community, right? And they give you some examples of how things that are already being done. But the big kicker here is that each one, like if I ask a student, no poverty, go do it, right? They don't know how to do that. But the United Nations has its Sustainable Development Goal targets, and under each one of the goals, there are different targets, right? And that actually helps you to break down that action, saying, oh, wait, I could actually see if I can increase this. I could actually try to go and do this. And then so this becomes a sort of how when you're thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals. And what's great that comes out of that, either when we do workshops with teachers, or when we do when we do leadership opportunities with students, or we do curricular-based opportunities with students, if you turn these targets into inquiry questions, now all of a sudden a student is saying, wow, I care about these big global issues. I've broken it down into a target, and now I have a couple of inquiry questions that I can use to frame my research, or to frame, how I want to take my learning forward. And these things can be applied to any subject matter, any grade level, right? It doesn't matter if it's math and statistics, or if it's particularly in science, right? You can also take your curriculum and scope and sequence and say, which one of these units naturally lends itself towards a sustainable development goal issue, or towards a particular target. And a lot of times we do that, and what you'll see is that you already have the themes there, but if we just intentionally map and we start inquiry and we have provocations around this bigger why, that's when we get the depth out of our students and we get the community engagement, because they want to know more about it. And here's an awesome example with Cindy. Steve, you want to talk about Cindy?
Yeah, so Cindy was one of my EAL students in grade 8, my last year of teaching, and my kids were starting to just get into inquiring a little bit more about food and nutrition. That's actually, again, one of the zero hunger targets, is around, are we, able to provide food security going forward, and nutrition is one of those particular targets. So our kids went on a photojournal exhibition around what was in the cafeteria just on campus. And again, that's that globalizing piece, where you're taking a global goal or a global target and flipping the question to ask, are we even doing this? Are we walking the walk towards sustainability? And immediately that particular inquiry led to, you can see the photojournal, you can see the embedded use of language, you can see the embedded use of technology, you can the media teams, etc., putting these together. And then they had an authentic audience, both in the cafeteria staff, or the company that was running the food services at the school, but also the administrative team, the board, the parents. And it's just, again, that authenticity, that relevance piece, that when you give the kids an opportunity to say, wait a minute, I can ask a question, I can use my language and my research and my data to actually now do something to move the needle in my community, and it also links to something that has been identified by the United Nations. That's amazing. Wow. And it just, there's that sense of your classroom just comes to life, and your students actually start to learn more about the world in a way that, you know, let's be honest, by 2030, for example, they're going to be in their 20s, and they need to have a world that feels more, you know, I think sustainable, and feel that they have a positive future and that they're contributing to it. Right. So back to that idea of like, we can do it. You mean we can actually do something now? And it's always an exciting thing. And Kavita, last point of just pulling it all together. Could you talk about this for us?
Definitely. So, well, I love this slide because it really brings everything together of what we've been talking about with the care and the why. But also I get to share the story of how Inspire Citizens got created because the idea of talent plus target equals vocation is actually the foundation of how Steve and Aaron realized that the world needs Inspire Citizens. We need an organization that can bring together the talents that they hold as educators, and I feel very honored and privileged to be part of that team now. So as we hold as educators, our passion for the targets that are under the Sustainable Development Goals, those 169 targets, but specifically quality education as goal number 4, and then quality education for all. So really sort of bringing those together and creating that vocation that we call Inspire Citizens. But the thing about it is that students can do that too. They have their own passions, they have their own talents, their own skills. And so what we do is that we give them that opportunity to think about those and to recognize those and to celebrate those. And so once we've sort of, you know, spent some time with them with the top 3 circles there of really thinking about, do you know what is it that you care about in the world? What makes you feel good? What is it that people have told you you're born to do? What is it that you wake up in the morning and jump out of bed for? Then they're really excited to start thinking about, okay, well, okay, I know all this cool stuff about me, so I better do something with it. so then we get into, you know, matching what they're really, really passionate about already and really good at already, and then developing other skills and interests to be able to match them with the targets that they care about, with the things in the world that they want to make a difference to. And sometimes it's their well-being. Sometimes they feel that, you know what, I just need to feel better in myself and I want my friends to feel good too. Sometimes it extends out further into the community, that I really want to know more about this diverse community that I'm living in, this, you know, and really ensure that, you know, there is some sense of equity out in the world. And other times it's that bigger thing that, you know, like I want that connection with nature globally. I want that connection with resources globally. I want to connect with, you know, building formative relationships globally. And sometimes it's that global perspective of well-being again. But either way, that talent gets matched with what they really care about. And even at the age of, I mean, these students are only 9 and 10. And even at that age, they already know what their vocation is. They can already have an understanding of what their purpose, their calling is in life. It's pretty powerful.
Awesome. So guys, we just really wrapped up at least a little bit of an initial jump into the care and part of empathy to impact. And just to give us again that idea of what do we care about in the world, like Kavita mentioned, how can we connect those to sort of our personal callings and our personal strengths? So the orange section is what's called aware. And we really want to dig into aware for a little bit here to make sure that we understand this concept of what we're going to talk for a few minutes about is what we call civic literacies. And we feel right now that civic education is so crucial in the world, whether it be on a local scale or even internally in your school, but also on a global scale. And are we prioritizing and embedding these sort of civic literacies and competencies to really apply our classroom learning to or through those pathways to really increase things such as intercultural understanding and that level of compassionate empathy that we talked about, that again is really the way that we can move the needle. If we don't care about, you know, the world and we don't understand ourselves, we don't have the civic literacy pathways, it's really difficult to get to a point of intercultural understanding and compassionate empathy, which then eventually can be the pathway to actually make a real impact, a long-term impact in your community. So we're going to dig a little bit into aware.
Just as Steve is transitioning, I want us all to just understand too that, remember, this is not different than our content information, right? These are all going to be, once we've provoked and launched people in an empathetic way about something that they care about, these are ways to go more deeply into our science content, our math content, our narrative and argumentative writing content, our ELA standards. So when you're looking at these next sort of opportunities, think about them as a way of leveraging deeper learning towards the stuff that we already have to teach. Sorry, go Steve.
No, that's fine. And guys, we're going to give you just kind of 30-second snapshots of a few of these different pathways that we were just talking about, very focusing on these three things: civic literacy, intercultural understanding, and compassionate empathy. So our first slide, Kavita, go. I'm just going to throw out names.
So this photo includes my very good friend Jacob Saw, our very good friend that's out in Nigeria, but actually came out to Beijing to meet some students. And what he's demonstrating for us here is that the power of conversation and to really be an active listener. So we have some provocative prompts and questions from some good friends of ours from the Out of the Blocks podcast. And what we were encouraging the students to do is to engage in meaningful conversation where not only are you listening to the answer to that initial question, but you're extending out then with a fantastic follow-up question. And so we have various prompts that we can use for that too. So awesome. That's the active listening.
Aaron, would you like to talk a little bit about deep culture?
Sure, you are really mixing this one up. Just kidding. So what's great about this too, like going back to what Kavita just said, is that, you know, we want our students to be better listeners and to better understand people. But when do we teach and specifically scaffold or intentionally put in active listening, the art of a follow-up question, and teaching depth of conversation? A lot of times we don't. And a great way to also do that is by then saying, well, there are different cultural contexts, right? There are different ways that we might have to, you know, conduct ourselves in different cultural contexts. But there's also wonderful things about so many different cultures that we can explore. And a great resource to be able to start looking at that and breaking that down and doing deeper research is by using a cultural iceberg to look at what parts of culture you're diving more deeply into and how it is that you're using that to explore in diverse cultural contexts and actively research or actively listen within different cultural contexts.
Yeah, and Aaron, I love what you're saying there again about we're very big on giving kids meta frameworks or thinking routines to get into these types of, you know, deep learning, you know, conversations and deep learning experiences. And here's just a perfect example. Even during COVID, we've been taking kids on street tours of Hanoi, for example, into the street market and having them filter just what they're seeing through pulling out some of this thinking, just to, again, to practice, just like you would in any type of a workshop setting, that gradual release of responsibility so that when you do get back to being able to go into the immersive experiences, you've got these things kind of in the back of your mind or in your back pocket as more of a thing that kids are automatically and regularly doing as, you know, global citizens. So this is a big one too I want to talk about that I think we often forget as educators is, again, you know that I already mentioned I'm very passionate about media literacy and multimedia. I also am very passionate about misinformation and disinformation, and are we actually teaching our kids how to navigate the world that they're really living in right now that is being trolled by lots of misinformation and disinformation. So we do a lot of work with the idea and the concept that data has stories, and we have to be able to not only understand what that story is, which we'll talk about in a minute, but also the fact that there are people out there that are trying to misinform us through the use of numbers and data, and how can we critically look at not only the source that we're getting, but really unpack what's going on in the different types of data that we get. So we work a lot with Hans Rosling's type work with kids. We also use the New York Times, what's going on in this graph. And this last professor from the University of Miami, Alberto Cairo, he is just a fantastic thinker, and he has a wonderful book to help you to understand how to share out with your students how to deconstruct data in what he calls graphicacy. Are we teaching kids how charts and graphs lie?
Well, and as we transition, you know, just remembering too that we all have stats statistics and data classes in our math content, right? We're all being asked through NGSS and different science standards to be looking at the data the stories that our data is telling, right? We have to do research when we're going into argumentative writing and credible sources, right? And that varies in complexity at different grade levels. And we can look at data, but are we unpacking it so that we're really looking at what it means? Right? And there's a lot of great tools to just take that same thing that you already have to do and slightly tweak it to be more intentional. And this one here is fantastic. This is another great tool called a root cause analysis, right? And once we have hooked somebody on something that they care about, or we've got somebody hooked on, I do actually want to contribute to quality education and target 4.7 on creating global citizenship education worldwide, or the one that you see here, which is, zero hunger, and their specific target, right, of everybody having access to healthy food. A lot of times, if we use thinking frames and meta frames like this, where we say, 1, look at your symptoms of this issue in your community. 2, try to ascertain what the roots of that are, and from those roots, use your sticky notes to be able to design further inquiry questions, right? You've gone from this big thing that students care about, and then you help to guide research, and you help to shift inquiry into more depth by following these types of root cause analyses within our research and within our inquiries.
Kavita, would you like to talk about storytelling again, to sort of piggyback off of what we talked about with the art of the interview?
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about active listening. We also touched on the idea of the power of observation. So for me, we've covered being seen, being heard, and now we're getting into being valued. Because it's through that power of storytelling that we really feel valued, right? We really feel that sense of what I'm bringing into the world, my experiences, my actual lived experiences are important to somebody because I have a captive audience that wants to hear that story. And for me, that's, basic fundamental human need. That's all we really want, to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued. And so we've integrated that into this part of the learning process that, let's share out our stories. Everyone has one. Let's give everyone an opportunity to hear the stories of others that, may be having very different lived experiences to our own, and really sort of, give the students those skills of interviewing, those skills of actively listening and observing, but then also understanding that story and really seeing the impact that it has on them to take them forward in their learning.
Guys, one other tool that we use that's very connected to everything that we're talking about that many of you have probably seen is through Compass Education out of Chiang Mai, some friends of ours. And again, what this offers us is a way for kids to start getting their heads around the idea that the Sustainable Development Goals and everything that we've been talking about in the Civic Literacies have that sense of interconnectedness and interdependence around it's the way it interacts and the way it causes and affects the relationships between nature, economy, society, and well-being. And it's just a wonderful way. It's a tool that we use for kids to see those causal relationships, but also to even audit some of the things that they are doing in terms of their consumption choices, or in ways that the school is acting towards sustainability. And how could we do a self-assessment or an audit of our school that could then turn into future projects. And again, here you can see the kids using our earlier tool to start thinking about how these particular nature targets may also affect the economy and the society and the wellness, not only of the planet, but of ourselves. Mr. Mo, you want to talk about AEIOU?
Well, and yes, and to reiterate, again, we're talking about the same things that we have to do in content. We're talking about having launched students into something that we care about, and we're talking now about slightly different ways for them to become more aware of what they care about in relationship to their standards. Right? Because we don't want to just use traditional research methods all the time or just use the mentor text, right? There are so many ways that we can differentiate and engage our students to get them more deeply aware. And another one of those is just an observation tool, right? There's so much power behind this one, for example, this AEIOU observation tool, where whether it be something that you're trying to understand, that you want to make an argument for, be something that's related to your science content, or be something that's related to an environment and ecosystems, or it's an experiential learning opportunity by which we're trying to, solve or make a positive impact on an issue. Have we researched by going out and saying what activities are happening, right? What are the environments those are happening in? What are these interactions, and what are the objects, and how are those things potentially either problematic or representative of particular habits? What do I need to find out more about now, right? And so using observational protocols is another great way to look into deep research, becoming deeply aware of the issues, and sort of these civic literacies as well.
Yeah, and we'll often use this tool before even kids go in to do interviews, for example, in a community, is just to get them to observe the community, to really understand those nuances of what's going on in the community and who might I want to go build a relationship and interact with on a deeper level, right? So, but we also see that it can be used in these, these nature situations. This is just down the street from my house in Forest Park, which is just pretty crazy. To think about what's really going on. I don't know anything about what kind of a butterfly this is. I don't know what type of plants these are, and just the inquiry questions right there could develop into a whole mini inquiry and fantastic unit. All right, really quickly, Kavita, media literacy.
So as Steve mentioned at the beginning of this, being really aware of what the information is that we're receiving day to day. My goodness, during this time, it's been crazy. And so we've really been able to use this tool in such a powerful way with students and with educators to help us become more aware of what it is that we're consuming. And then as we become more thoughtful consumers, how can we become more responsible producers of that media? Well, we would suggest that a way of doing that is to, as we said at the beginning, zooming out to zoom in. Well, how about we break this apart, break the media down into all its component parts of who created it, why did they create it, what format have they used, all of that. And then once you have that deeper understanding, it doesn't seem so overwhelming and other words, that you might associate with the media that's out in the world right now. And then you can really sort of take those separate parts and decide, well, would I do it like that? As a responsible producer of media, what decisions might I make as the author? What format might I use? What content might I create to create a different emotion, to create a different feeling in the world that's perhaps more conducive to that collective sense of well-being that I always come back to?
And we use a lot of this from a group called MediaLit.org, which just has a wonderful resources that are geared towards unpacking these 5 key questions and the 5 key concepts that Kavita was just articulating. Lastly, in this section, guys, we do want to come back and close with that idea of data. We work with teachers and students a lot on this relationship between what we call big data and thick data. And we live in a world right now, even the way that we report on our students is still often very numbers driven, right? So we even take it to working, on helping with mastery portfolios with schools, and really that idea of there is a story behind the number. I am not just a number. People are not just numbers. And for us to be able to get students into that understanding of, yes, numbers can tell us a story, but we have to get to the human level to really understand and unpack 2 things. One, that the human level can enhance the richness of the numbers, the story that the data is saying, but also that the data is not always telling the full picture, right? And there's a wonderful book that I've read recently called Tyranny of Metrics that really kind of helps us to unpack that relationship between that idea that we cannot only just rely on numbers. So it's a really important piece, I think, on an intellectual level as educators, but also in today's data-driven world to explain to our students to reconnect with the human side of life. All right, quickly, we're going to talk about ABLE because, again, we talked about how you are the masters of the ABLE section. And then we have about 10 minutes left because we do want to end really powerfully on impact. So Aaron, could you just give us like the elevator pitch on ABLE here?
Absolutely. And I think I've been sort of splicing this in throughout the whole conversation, but what we've been talking about this entire time are ways that we can leverage inquiry, the ways that we can get students to link up to the things that they really care about in the world and apply it to their standards. We all have our disciplinary standards, right? That we can do this within. It doesn't matter if it's your math class. It doesn't matter if it's your science content. It doesn't matter if it's, ELA or writing, or if it's within the specific, the internal assessment of the business management part of the DP, or the IO of your Lang and Lit, or the IO of the Lang Lit curriculum in DP, right? They all are subjects where we can apply this stuff to. And then sometimes there's also interdisciplinary opportunities for us. And we all have tech standards, right? Whether it is that we have, the ISTE standards that we have to leverage, whether it is that we have our 21st century learning skills, or we have our student learner outcomes, or whatever our school uses, we can make sure that those are being leveraged by all of the things that you heard before or previously. And finally, we are all language teachers, right? Every single time that we're working with students is an opportunity to develop all domains of language. So just know that through interviewing, right, as a way to get more into a social justice standard or into a global or sustainable development goal, right, we are using the language domains to help them be better at their content area, right? We might even be using the language domains and a tech standard because we're using the cameras, right, to get them to be better at their math, because they care about it, and because we're using alternative civic literacies in order to get that content to explode into, I will allow Steve to transition at this point, because next is impact. Right? If we can get them to care, if we can get them to deeply, dynamically, and in a differentiated fashion, become more aware, and we leverage our standards and our teaching content that we have, that's when we go towards looking at what is the impact. I don't want to do all this stuff and have it just end at my assessment in the classroom, right? I want to give students an opportunity to take action, to identify who they want to have an impact on, and make sure that their why is really coming into fruition, right? So that they're actually doing something. Kavita,
let's pass it over to Kavita. Talk to us a little bit about some of those pathways.
Yes, definitely. So as Steve and Aaron have been saying, we want to extend the students' learning out into the community. We want to give them the chance to really see how their learning is making a difference in the world. So we have a full menu here of how they could do that. Here we've got some young students that are actually on a rooftop garden in a school in Beijing, and they're participating in composting. So they're actively participating in contributing to, changing their world in a positive way by, taking on these activities. The next one is, again, same location, but here the student is wanting to advocate for nature, advocate for the growing of, food by the schools so that they can have more healthy food, and also for all the ripple effects that they've come to understand of attracting the insects, of really having that better understanding of not only where their food comes from, but how to care for living things. So there's so many different elements that come out of just from that one activity of advocacy, of, that they're really advocating for themselves, but also nature, but also the connection that they feel with nature and then with others around them. And so when we sort of extend it out to thinking about the buildings that are in the city, we encourage the students to share their learning in an event. And so they decided that we're going to host an event for our local community, extend it out to our parents, extend it out to others that may be interested, to really understand that, there's a lot of beautiful buildings in our cities, and they're not necessarily being visited and cared for in a way that they could be. So they held an event around the UNESCO Heritage Cultural Sites and really raised that awareness of, do you know what, we have some history in our city that we need to be paying more attention to and understanding why that's relevant for us today.
Hey, Kavita, can I talk about design change? Because these are some of my kiddos. Is that cool?
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So when I was still teaching these kids, for example, we were designing square foot gardens, right? And we were working with the design class, working on reading, the literacy components in, and then we shared out to teach makers workshops to the local community. Here again is the behind the scenes of some of our vlogging and podcasting of kids that went out to interview seniors in the community. Second graders adapting lifestyle to persuade the community to reduce waste on campus. This is one of our good friends. We were so lucky to work with Salva Dut from A Long Walk to Water. When I was in Malaysia, I reached out and I was able to bring him to my school in Malaysia, and he was integrated. We have a program. We also work with schools called Activist in Residence programs. We say, well, if we bring authors and if we bring other people to our campus, artists, why not activists, right? And Salva spent a whole week with us at that school and other schools. Creatively expressing, this idea that art can make a difference. And Aaron, do you want to take the last row?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I will play my summarizer hat, in that you can allow students to choose. You can use this menu to create as a teacher if you wanted to do more guided inquiry. But really, if we take our learning and we allow people to just make it a workshop, make media about it that reaches out or that teaches others, right? Or use that thing that you are learning to fuel some kind of a potential enterprise, or then design, host, adapt a lifestyle, publish, participate, advocate, just pick one, right? And I'm not trying to say that to sound, facetious at all. I mean, sometimes you can use your standards to get towards a summative learning or a summative sharing of learning, and you can do all the assessment that you need to prepare kids for and allow that learning to live on and not just be the summative assessment.
And I think this slide I just wanted to mention, is the joy, right? I think just seeing this was when I was a sixth grade teacher, and just the joy of the kids having the experience to not only to build something, but then to articulate their learning, to study about, food security of the future, to create something that was in then my classroom window for about 3-4 months. And they were just the pride and the joy and the ability to share out to multiple communities. It's just, I think you see it in their faces, and this, I don't have to explain. When kids know that their learning matters, it's an empowering moment. I think the last thing, guys, we want to really talk about today before we start to close up is for who. You've got this palette of ideas of what you could do or how you could take action. And then if you cross-reference that with the ability for kids to not only internally in the school or their homes, but also then locally or globally connect with these different types of, we call this a community asset survey. It's just the possibilities are really endless. You start to go back to all the things they could care about, whether it's, well-being, sustainable development, and social justice. Mesh that with all of the different civic literacies that they can take to start to go deeper into their learning, and then all of these possible impact projects and outputs. It's just, there's so many great pathways that then you as a teacher can start to help your kids decide, do I want to take a guided inquiry route and sort of guide them to a specific output? Or as kids get more comfortable with things like free inquiry or free or project-based learning, we've seen it when we launch things like personal projects with schools, they can do it. They can learn this empathy to impact project cycle. They can highlight and connect the dots quite easily. And I'll tell you, the outputs, just like you saw here, are pretty awesome, and they just feel so empowered. It's a wonderful opportunity. Here, for example, is just a little Word document that we were asked to create for our friends at Western Academy, Beijing. And just to be able to help teachers, in a Word document when they're doing guided inquiry, to start highlighting potential pathways that kids could go so they're ready to make those final steps. And Aaron, if you'd be so kind, we guys, we know we're pushing our hour, but we do want to help you really quickly to see what it kind of looks like in a final sort of, let's pull it all together. Because I think we don't want you to leave feeling like this. We want you to leave feeling like the one on the right. Okay, so Aaron, just can you give us a quick overview of this, and then we'll close up shop.
A lot of times we're told by our schools, to do a project on sustainability, right? Just choose something, and do a project on it, or do a media project on it, or, let this one be your sustainability project, right? And a lot of times it ends up, like this summary that you see in front of you. well, how do you write a script and do a podcast and then have an impact on community members and then talk about how they contribute to their learning? It's a jumble. Really, if you can add a why and a what now to the stuff that you already have to teach, right? If you can use one of the strategies to say, what do we care about? How are we going to become more aware of this issue? How do we make sure that we're doing those to make our writing or our science or our math or our disciplinary standards better? And then what are you going to do with that? How are you going to take action? That's when projects like the one that you just saw actually come to life. And it doesn't have to be this insane approach to curriculum. It can literally be your same unit, but you just attach it to a little bit of a why, a little bit more deeper approach to researching, and make sure that there's a what now component that you can impact your community in one way or another. Right?
And guys, you can see in this particular model, back to that sounds like sustainability that Aaron just mentioned in terms of it being a little bit of a jumble. If we start to hone in on some of the tools that we have just provided you throughout this presentation, you can see we've linked the why to empowering women's voices through technology. We've also talked about the curiosity kids are going to get in their neighborhood by going out to interview. We've looked at, we need to teach interviewing skills, and we maybe need to go to that community first to just observe and take in, the people that we're going to be talking to. We need to understand media literacy. What is a good podcast? What do I need to do to create a good podcast? How am I using my technology? How am I linking that to my language? Potentially some of our schools use a lot of the 21st century learning or deep thinking frameworks, right? And then lastly, if we're going to produce a podcast, and who might we partner with in our community or internationally to learn more about that? And these kids, which was so cool in that particular project that started kind of as a jumble, it turned into something where they had a very focused group of women that they talked to across the street from our school. And then they hosted an international event for ethical journalism. And here you can see some pictures of how that went, talking to members of the community, empowering the voices of women and capturing the stories of senior women through technology, and then turning that into hosting a global event where they literally brought in the guys from the podcast that inspired them out of the blocks from Baltimore, flew overseas to spend a week at the school, and the kids hosted and ran all of the workshops for international schools that came to Seoul Foreign School to be a part of this endeavor. So again, that piece of making it fit. And here again are just some things for takeaways. This is just a whiteboard of a 7th grade math teacher and a 7th grade design teacher in Beijing that used empathy to impact to snapshot what a unit could look like for tiny houses, where they looked at area and volume and the climate footprint and the carbon footprint of energy in our normal houses, and then did 3D printing of their models and had an expo. Kavita, briefly.
Here, we just wanted to emphasize the point that empathy to impact can be used across the entire school. There's the picture of me getting very enthusiastic as I'm speaking to a kindergarten teacher at one of our schools' partnership in Beijing. And it's just really sort of wanting to demonstrate the point that this really is accessible for even the youngest students. We mentioned earlier about our Activists in Residence program, and the 3-year-old child that's sitting there creating models of trees to help save the rainforest from, recyclable materials, and knowing that that's what she's doing it for, so that she can raise money for our activists in residence to take money to the indigenous people that live in the Amazon rainforest will never leave me. It really is accessible for all age groups.
And Aaron, would you like to talk briefly about our work at Singapore American School with interdisciplinary units?
Yes, I'm a little bit concerned of our going over time, but this can also be done as a whole grade interdisciplinary all subject approach as well, right? There are ways that we can try and take these bigger ideas of sustainability. We can look through a lens of dystopian ELA, or we can look at stats in math and how that links to specific, social studies issues. right? And we can use the graphing and data analysis within science, right, to look at what we want a future to actually look like. Right? And they can all tie into each other, whether it's one subject, one classroom, or it's a whole entire grade level and every single subject integrated. And I would really sort of want to end on this note that we're all here because we believe that it's important, right? Our students want to do it, right? There are simple pathways that we can use as teachers. There are ways that we can leverage our schools to try and do what the world needs us to. And sometimes just by a little bit of an intentional tweak, or by taking some of these tools and linking it to the stuff that we already have to do, there's potential for hundreds of impact projects to come out of a grade level, thousands of impact projects to come out of our schools within one country. And if we can start to get more teachers around the world to be able to use schools as a place of positive change, then we're using our existing resources to try and help meet the world's greatest needs. And I know already teaching is an admirable vocation, right? And if we can wear that hat too, the power that we have. So,
hey guys, I just want to leave. If we, Twitter is a place that, we stay in touch and connect with a lot of people. We kind of avoid the politics if that's okay, but we do like to really connect, and that's how we've met a lot of people, a few people that are in our master's cohort, like Ellen, who's in the call. That's how we first connected. And we just want to say, reach out, and we would love to collaborate with any and all of you on continuing to move the needle for, the health of our kids and the health of our schools and the health of the world, because, we need it, as Aaron said. So thank you so much for your time. Shonal, I know we had offered, guys, if you feel the need to stay 10, 15 minutes and go into some breakout rooms and do a Q&A with us, we're happy to do that. And yeah, we're just so happy you're here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And thank you, Steve, Aaron, and Kavita. It was a wonderful hour. I just want to put it out there that we are having 2 workshops with the Inspire Citizen team in October and November. So if you're all interested, just you can find details at our website. So if, as Steve says, if you want to stay back and have questions, we are here. And if you have to leave, we understand. So please stay safe and be healthy, and hope you all have a good rest of the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Shonal. That was fun. Very fun.
It was really fun.
and if you would like to, and we're not asking people to stay around, but if you did have any particular questions, if you would throw it into the chat right now, or if you would type it in the chat, then we can address that. If there's anything in particular you'd like to speak about. Sorry, I said that really formally.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Questions, if you guys have anything you want to know.
So I think everybody who's here wants to connect. Would you prefer to kind of ask questions or get into a breakout room and meet with Kavita, Steve, and Aaron separately? If you could just put that on chat, then we know what it is.
How many people are left, Shonal?
We're about 25.
Yeah, why don't we break out? Do you want to break? Kavita, are you there? Do you want to set up?
I have that. I have set it up.
Yeah, let's go ahead and break out so we can throw a few like little 10 minutes of roundtable, or just kind of throw out some ideas. And
yeah.
I think
with that, Aaron?
Stepped away for a second. So I wonder if Kavita can join my breakout room and we just split down the middle with the people who are left. Is that okay?
Okay, so you want Kavita to join your breakout room? Okay. Yeah, and Kavita, but I should only create 2 rooms?
Please, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll let Kavita do all the talking.
Okay.